English Forward presents.
Today we're going to be chatting to Dr. David Mazzara, CEO of MLaw, an international lawyer and a blockchain advisor. I just want to welcome you to the English Forward podcast, David.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Can you tell us a bit about where you're from and where you're based in the world?
Yes, of course. Originally, I'm a Hungarian national, so I come from Hungary. You might have heard of Budapest already.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. I enjoy it a lot. That's where I actually had my first diploma, my first doctorate from the ELTE Law School.
Okay.
After that, I started sort of traveling around the world. I studied and worked in Austria, Germany, England, Russia, and I finally ended up in the Netherlands. That's where I'm currently based as well, in Amsterdam. This is where I have my offices, and this is where I also live.
That's amazing. Did you actually study in all those different places?
Yes, I studied and worked in all of these places. I had sort of a prolonged academic career. Right now, I still research and I teach as well at the Amsterdam University. I'm researching on a PhD level blockchain and law, so anything that's at the intersection of these two subjects.
Yeah, it's amazing. It must give you a really big perspective from an international point of view, having worked and studied in multiple jurisdictions like that.
Yes, even before blockchain and even before all of these emerging technologies, it was always sort of my MO, and I always wanted to focus on the international and the supranational aspect of law and business. So I always wanted to research comparative private law, for example, because I was always interested in how the different legal systems and jurisdictions interact with each other, and what is that thin layer that's in between, the no man's land, what happens there. And I think it's more actual than ever before. It's more relevant than ever before now, with blockchain happening purely online, on the internet and internationally. I mean, you can register just a dummy corporation somewhere offshore, and you can just have a branch office in another country, and then actually live in a third one. And then you're just mixing everything together. So you really detach yourself from the traditional description of belonging to a jurisdiction, basically.
Yeah, I suppose that creates a lot of gray areas in the law, and we're going to be chatting about that in due course, and what the advantages of certain jurisdictions are as opposed to others. But I just wanted to ask you, if I'd ask you a question, who is David Mazzara and what does he stand for? What would you say to me?
A couple of years ago, I probably would have said that it's a lawyer guy. It's some sort of a legal advisor guy who's trying to find clever legal solutions, thinking outside the box. But recently, more and more, I think of myself as an entrepreneur who has something to do with law and business together. I own multiple companies, and I have also minority shares in a lot of ventures and projects, whether they are, ICOs, STOs, or just traditional startups, or even well-established companies. So I would say I'm more of a businessman or serial entrepreneur at this level.
Interesting. So what inspires you?
Most of all, technology and clever solutions. So in the common element, the common feature in all of the ventures that I partake in is usually clever solutions, smart products, AI, drone, blockchain, education on smart education. So everything that's clever, that inspires me.
Okay. And are you a sporty guy? How do you spend your leisure time? It sounds like you do a lot of work.
Very good question. I actually used to wrestle on a competitive level, Greco-Roman wrestling, freestyle wrestling.
Yeah, that's interesting. Great sport.
I did that at a pretty high level in Hungary, because Hungarians like to wrestle and they like these kind of sports. But ever since I left, I didn't really have the time to join a club or really dedicate a lot of time. So I just go to the gym and I run occasionally. But I like to keep myself very fit.
Yeah, I think that's so important when you've got a high-paced business life, to balance it out with
exactly
physical exercise.
Exactly.
And so your background is law. You've traveled and worked extensively all over the world, and then you developed an interest in crypto and blockchain. When was that, and what actually sparked that interest?
That was late 2016, early 2017. I was approached by some ex-clients slash partners to advise them, because obviously at that time nobody really knew what was going on. Is this actually even legal? Is this some sort of a scheme, a Ponzi scheme, or money laundering, etc., etc.? So I was just approached to give some opinion on the subject matter and to research it. I already heard about Bitcoin years before that, and I had some sort of understanding what it is and how it works. But upon request, it was an actual professional request, I started researching it. I researched it, and I actually asked around in my close vicinity, in my close network as well. Like, do you guys know this? What is it about? Had some meetings, started attending some conferences, and as my knowledge and crypto relevant network grew, I was more and more fascinated by this world. And that's when I started, the first ICOs, the first OTC deals, the first kind of, advisory roles, etc.
That's amazing, eh? And I think with a perspective like you've got, when you look to the future, what are the future possible applications that you see that, blockchain technology can actually fulfill?
How much time do you have? we can be here all week. I wrote a lot of articles about this, and this is one of the first things that I also like to teach or speak about, because I think the possibilities are endless. The potential applications are just wonderful. You just think of very simple things, removing the middleman. And now the middleman can be even a lawyer, a notary, or the bank itself. If you think of blockchain and smart contracts as a trustless system that is, peer-to-peer, and you can just basically create systems without having to go through these verification, centralized institutions, etc. For example, you just want to sell your house. The number one issue there is, of course, all the costs, the documentation, all the hassle of that. How easy would that be if your house had its individual serial number on the blockchain? With the help of a state-verified smart contract, you could just one click on it, put it on sale, and then the other person who had the necessary funds, whether in crypto or in fiat, could just click on the same offer, and the transaction occurred, done.
Yeah, that'd be incredibly simple, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and the same way could be used. The same method could be used for cars. The number one issue with cars is, of course, used cars, especially scamming and manipulating the kilometer and conditions, etc. Imagine if all of that was actually, so all the services and everything were kept up to date on the blockchain. So there was a public ledger where you could actually check every single car, or we could even make it half private, if you don't want all of this private information hanging around. We could make it half private, whereby if you enter into sort of a letter of intent or a memorandum of understanding, then you can reveal the private part of the ledger, and then see where exactly that car went to service, where it was checked up, when it had issues, or even speeding, anything, when it was involved in any sort of problems. So it would sort of decriminalize and clean the scene for many assets.
That's an amazing, because I think you're 100% right, especially in the motor industry. There's always a gray area there as to what you're buying if you're buying something secondhand.
Exactly.
And tell me, so you've spoken about two different industries, property and motor vehicles. How close are we to actually being able to utilize something like that in a grander scale than just an isolated example?
Yeah, well, the technology is already there. The technology has been there for a long time, whether blockchain or not. So that's never been really the problem. If you can recall, I just mentioned that even such a blockchain should be state verified, or at least approved by the government. The reason for that is because it would be too big of a jump to put this into the hands of a private group of people, whether that's a company or just one nameless creator who would set up this blockchain. I think to gain that, it's more about the trust of the public, and it's kind of ironic because we're talking about trustless trust when it comes to most smart contracts.
Yeah. So
I think to bridge that gap, we need a forward looking and kind of progressively thinking state such as the Netherlands, for example, that would issue or at least permit the issuance of such a blockchain and such a system, and then not force the people into it, but offer as a very smart and cost efficient alternative. So I think the only problem here is the willingness and not the ability. But I think as there are more and more use cases and more courses teaching this, and people realize that crypto and blockchain are not just the criminal element and the money laundering, etc. So they accept the real life value and usage of this technology, then we will also have the willingness eventually. I assume around 3 to 5 years max.
Because it's funny, there's always two camps. There's the centralized and the decentralized. And obviously government and corporate, etc., sits on the one end of that scale. And then the decentralized thinking sits on the other end. But in the middle somewhere, for the two parties to agree, we need to find some sort of a middle ground. Because that's going to get us to the next step. And it sounds like the Netherlands is a very forward-thinking jurisdiction. Would you say so?
Absolutely. Well, what you just mentioned is actually very, very important, because like I said, there always has to be some sort of a middleman, because you don't want to trust blindly the other person. So in a sense, governments themselves are the middleman when it comes to taxation, when it comes to regulation, lawmaking, or just general way of thinking. They set the pace, they set the tempo, and they redistribute the money. Their role and their position would be threatened if the situation and the public acceptance of blockchain would accelerate, because eventually that would lead to a situation where we don't need governments anymore. Now, I know this is bordering the tinfoil hat thinking and utopic situation, but if you really accelerate this kind of thinking, then this is where it leads. So to that end, I would say the Netherlands is definitely progressive and forward thinking, because they're putting people first. That's what I experienced, at least as a insider-outsider mix. But still, you can sense that a country is a country, a government is a government. They like the power that they have, and they are not gonna let go of that.
I think that's pretty natural. I mean, for hundreds and hundreds of years, those systems have existed and functioned, and society's grown. And to whatever degree, successful or not in some cases, but it's very hard to change legacy thoughts like that. Exactly. And I think incremental changes that actually, and funnily enough, I mean, your sphere in the law is where, because that's the gray area really, is to figure out what is legal, what isn't, what is permissible within the context of a country. And can you just give us some idea? I mean, what, from a legal point of view, how difficult is it to actually implement and put in place structures and laws to iron out and eradicate those gray areas? Because a lot of people are sitting in the middle now, not sure whether it's legal, not legal. How do we go forward from here?
It's how difficult is it? It's very, very difficult. And that's not because of the nature of the subject matter. It's not because of I don't know how deeply the previous system is rooted. No, it's simply to make that person, that judge, that lawmaker, that professor of law understand what you're talking about. That's impossible. I don't want to name names, obviously, but I know people who are current sitting judges in very high places, very high courts, who don't know how Wi-Fi works, and they simply don't understand the concept of wireless internet. How do you go from that point to convincing that judge that this is something that can happen without trust and without the interference of the state or a bank or a lawyer or a notary? That's nigh impossible at this level. So I think what we need, not just in the Netherlands or in Europe, but in the whole world, is education. And we need courses and workshops that are educating the crowd, but also experts, to let them know that this is not, witchcraft, and this is not an impossible futuristic thing. This is here and now, and it existed 5 years ago already.
But David, I agree with you. You speak to people that are more traditionalists and using old systems than looking to new systems, be it Wi-Fi or whatever it is. Even if you look within the blockchain environment, certainly a lot of the guys that I chat to, definitely my friends, if you talk about blockchain and you talk about some of the concepts, they really have heard about it, but they don't have much clue at all. And those would be people that be a lot closer than that particular judge to accepting it and using it. And yet they are very, very far away. So I agree with you. I think the key is going to be education.
Absolutely.
And I know you're involved in lecturing at the university in Amsterdam. Is that correct?
Yes, at the Vrije University. I am usually a guest lecturer.
And you've also got is it an academy, Vicarium?
Yes. We are giving workshops and we are teaching with that entity. We travel around the world. We either speak with other speakers who belong under our umbrella, or we organize our own events where we like to educate the masses, but also experts about blockchain and about smart contracts and about crypto and just generally speaking, smart products and emerging technologies.
So where in the world do you find the audience to be the most receptive?
You would be very surprised, but actually in the Middle East. You would wow. Yes, you would think that they are very, very traditional in their thinking, in their culture. But I travel especially a lot to Qatar, where I speak to a lot of high-ranking people, and I like to give them advice and insight into how business is done in Europe. And they ask a lot about blockchain, and they are very curious, and they would like to do it the modern way, the new way. And they are very much willing to change, their core beliefs for this as well.
But yeah, I think it's indicative of that region, because if you look at the progress they've made in a short space of time, it's unbelievable.
Yes, absolutely.
You've got leaders that are very forward thinking. In fact, I remember flying back from Dubai, I think last year, sort of February, March, and listening to a chat just on the internal sort of news channel about what the Sheikh was thinking about, the progress, etc., etc. And I remember being quite sort of taken aback with a comment that he made, that he'd put money into sponsoring, and I think the number was 1 million young people to become network engineers. That was part of the plan that they were rolling out. That's very forward thinking. It's certainly not something that's happening in Africa.
No, absolutely not. And also just one more sentence about the Middle East, and I will also address Africa because it's a good point. These are not those Arabs that from the 60s, 70s anymore, or even the 80s, 90s, who just have a lot of money, who have the oil money. No, these are very highly educated, and I would even say Western school. They usually go to London or UK. They get very, very good education in business and in technologies, and they make very sound decisions. Some of the people, some of the sheikhs who I meet are extremely smart and are very well aware of the world and how it works. So different era for that region in the world.
Yeah, I think it's excellent. And I'm sure that in that area as well, they cultivate a jurisdiction that is accepting of people that want to set up businesses, etc. Because there are certain jurisdictions that are more pro and others that are against. Could you just give us some ideas around like the type of jurisdictions that if someone was going to be setting up a company would be good to look at?
As in for like a blockchain heavy or crypto heavy company?
Yes, that's correct.
Look, the public perception is always that something that's onshore, so like let's say continental Europe or in the US or something that's like in a hardcore jurisdiction, that's better and that's more prestigious. So from an investor's perspective and from just a public perception perspective, it's always better to have one of the cleaner, nicer jurisdictions in Europe, let's say Netherlands, Malta, Estonia, even Switzerland. These are very nice and commonly accepted and highly regarded jurisdictions. But if you want the real protection, or you really just want protection and you don't care about the public perception or what the state has to offer, then still, sadly, offshore jurisdictions prevail, such as Caymans, BVI. These have firewall regulations that do not allow foreign judgments to be enforced against the entity, secrecy laws with banking, where you can essentially hide assets. But the negative side of this is that it's been known as the hotspot for scams and for exploitation as well.
Yeah, but I think that's maybe the differentiation. If you're a company that's looking for investment, a more recognized onshore type jurisdiction would be better for you. But
Definitely.
if you wanted more secrecy and privacy, then a lot of offshore jurisdictions are available.
Absolutely. And there is also a big difference between what sort of an enforcer is present in that jurisdiction. And by that I mean not just the state as an entity, but also its prolonged arms like monetary authorities or securities and exchange commissions, etc. And in that regard, for example, the US is top dog. The SEC is a very scary and mighty foe. And you would definitely, you only go there if you have an established audience or an established group and network of investors, and you intend to fully get licensed and go by the paved road, because there are no other solutions, there are no options when it comes to the US, for example. Whereas
flexible,
Yeah, exactly. Whereas, for example, if you go here in the Netherlands, or I believe also in Estonia, there are certain alternative investment fund management licenses or exceptions where you don't even really have to worry about registration or licensing requirements. And also under the general umbrella of the European Union, it's allowed to have some sort of a special purpose vehicle and raise some funds as seed capital or for general investment purposes.
Yeah, that's so interesting. It's some of the questions that I had to ask when we were setting up, and that's exactly right. When you're looking for investment, you've got to go with something that's perceived to be safer, and
exactly.
I suppose more sort of mainstream. But you've advised hundreds of startups. You worked with Fortune 500 companies, high net worth individuals, and family offices in structuring and helping them put structures in place that'll be tax effective and actually help them maximize their profits.
That's correct.
Can you discuss that a little bit and maybe unpack the types of solutions that you suggest?
Yes, of course. Just off the top of my head, the number one question that you have to ask yourself is, what exactly do you want to do? What is the source of your money? Like, is it real estate, or is it some gold or trading or forex or whatever you can think of? Once the source is established, how do you want to use it? How do you want to maybe reinvest it? Or do you want to, buy real estate with it? Or you want to own several other companies? And then we can put together some sort of a plan. Now, that's just on the onset of the topic. To come up with an actual answer to your question, I would say private foundations are very, very hot right now. 2017, a new law came out in the Cayman Islands that allows for the setup of such a private foundation that is not necessarily owned by the owner or the shareholder, but he's the beneficiary. And the kind of situation that this creates is that you don't have these assets to your name, so you can safely store them away in a jurisdiction where it's not going to be bothered. But you can own other companies, assets, real estate, bank accounts through that entity. And what you can do basically is you can appoint yourself as the director of some of these subsidiaries, depending on where your residence is. And this can work for virtually everybody from all around the world, also for US residents.
That's interesting. So to actually get a structure like that put in place, you'd need to set up could you set it up as an individual, or would you need to set up a company?
No, you can set it up as an individual. We can help you from basically 0 to 100%. This is what we do predominantly now in 2019 because, well, luckily a lot of our clients got rich from crypto ventures.
Yeah.
And now they want to store it safely, whether it's for a personal reason, they don't want their wives to know about it, or to optimize the tax burden on it, or simply to access a different kind of market without revealing the person's identity. This is the future of holding entities. So this is like a holding company on steroids, and you can even name your children or your wife or your family as beneficiaries. You can set up a structure where there is a certain transaction occurring frequently for the benefit of these beneficiaries. And basically you can just add as many subsidiaries as you want. Say you want to enter the I don't know, Hong Kong or Chinese market, you can just set up a string of subsidiaries. We can help you with that. And it's a one-stop shop, what we offer.
And then is the tax and law and everything covered in the Caymans?
Yes, absolutely. We take care of that. We have international lawyers and local lawyers alike on our payroll. So basically what we do is you tell us what you want to do. Hey, I have this much money. I want to use it for this purpose, or I want to, I don't know, store it safely for this reason. And not just the entity or the documentation, but also the bank account comes with the package. So everything.
And is there a minimum threshold of an investor that you look at?
Basically, it's up to the current residency of that person. Let's say you're a resident in any of the major European countries. If you earn at least 100K a year, you usually belong to the highest bracket of taxation, right? So yeah, that's somewhere around 50%, give or take. Then you're effectively given, now I'm just really talking like random numbers, right? So this is not an actual legal or financial advice. I'm just putting some numbers out there for whoever's listening. So let's say from that 100K, you would give away at least 50K to the state, unless you manage to reduce it by, accumulating for expenses, or you have some clever solution on shore, etc. In any case, you can at least to half of that, your money, you can kiss goodbye at the end of the year, if you do everything by the book. What we can do instead, as we set up this private foundation for you, you create an entity where you're resident, you hire yourself or you appoint yourself as director of that entity, and you only have to pay taxes over the salary that you decide to pay out for yourself. Everything else, the profits, everything else can be basically transferred to the main entity that's offshore, and it will not be taxed.
That makes sense, doesn't it?
So to give, because that wasn't your question was what is the threshold? Basically, the minimum setup costs of such a foundation range between 5 to 15K, depending on the extras that the person wants to add on it. So if you spend any more than that in taxation, and I guess everybody does, or most of the people do, unless they live below minimum wage, basically, then it's already a good idea. Because after that, the annual maintenance is around $2,500–3,000, I'm speaking, and that's it. And then you're set for life.
And does that include the accounting, or is the accounting above that?
No, everything is included in that, all the costs.
Gee, that's actually it's very, very cost effective. If you compare that to other jurisdictions, they're far more heavy than that.
Even if you compare it to the same jurisdiction, but you want to go one of the main four law firms, and obviously not going to name names, but any other big law firms, because they have to account for many more costs, right? So the money goes through hundreds of lawyers, and everybody has to be paid. Whereas we are still a relatively small team. We are around 10 to 15, I say around, because we have ad hoc advisors as well who just come on for a specific case. And basically don't have to pay as many people, and our offices are not that expensive. So what we do, instead of getting our pockets very fat and rich, is we try to reduce the costs for the client so that we can accumulate a bigger client base.
That makes 100% sense. I think, in everything we've spoken about with the way the world's moving, you're probably going to find that being very attractive to a lot more people. And we're back to education again, is teaching people that there are these structures in place that can actually help them and help them get ahead further, quicker.
Exactly. And the benefit of doing business with me and with us is that it's not just that one thing that you get. It's not like you go to the shop, you buy a loaf of bread, and then you're done for the day. I also give you advice on the blockchain itself, or a short sort of education or consulting. And I'm used to guiding people through their entire process and kind of hand holding, which can of course have its disadvantages and annoyance for me sometimes, but I like to do it.
Yeah, I think it's important. But I think you're a teacher at heart, aren't you, David?
Yeah, I guess so. At the end of the day.
Yeah, that's great. I just want to hop back to Europe because I know you're a board member and the chief legal officer at the European Cryptocurrency Exchange.
Yes.
Is that
yes.
a pretty new exchange? Can you tell us about it and what you guys are setting up?
Yes. So basically, this is going to be obviously, since I have a skin in the game, I would say the number one exchange in Europe, at least. And number one, I'm not talking about by volume or by hype or by branding. We chose a very traditional name, nothing crazy, nothing for the cool kid. The reason we chose this name and the entire thinking behind this entity is simple: is to be another European entity or institution that serves a purpose. And we thought that a fully transparent and licensed and fully compliant exchange was missing. There was a gap that we wanted to fill, and that's why we call it European Cryptocurrency Exchange. It's nothing fancy, nothing crazy, very simple. It exactly does what it says. So basically, I'm not allowed to say with whom, with which entities and with which authorities we have agreements, but we already have major partnerships and major agreements, and we are going to launch very soon. But the main takeaway from all of this is that we're not just somebody who started kissing the ass of the government and the European Union, pardon my French, just to get the licenses and be transparent and get the nepotism. No, we are also technologically superior. Whereas, for example, NASDAQ and general trading institutions in US have a transaction speed of 7 to 10,000 per second. In major crypto exchanges, that goes up to 500,000 to 1 million per second. Our speed is 31 million per second.
Jeez, that's like an exchange on steroids.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. We haven't been advertising this fact yet because it's such a bold claim that everybody immediately laughs us out of the room. So we've been working hard to put together a tech demo, which we will be now presenting to authorities and the general populace alike.
That sounds amazing. I was thinking, we spoke about the two different camps, the centralized and decentralized, and I think partnering with established, recognized institutions like you guys have done really makes sense because it just adds that credibility that the biggest part of the market is actually looking for.
Exactly.
For that credibility. So well done with that.
Thank you very much. Absolutely. And if I might just add, if you look at other exchanges, there's always some drama. There are always scandals, frozen funds, stolen funds, shut down wallets or accounts, and millions and tens of millions lost. And that money is not lost from big companies. That's lost from the thousands of users, the general people, the little guys. And we want to prevent that.
Yeah, I think it's so necessary. It's giving people the confidence to invest in something that has got longevity.
Exactly.
That always comes down. I think if you can prove that and prove that it works. We always speak about adoption and how do you get blockchain adoption and how do you get that critical mass going. And the key component is actually trust. Because if people don't trust, they move forward and then they're swayed by popular opinion and they stop and they start and then they have the skepticism and it just never gets going.
That's exactly what we just discussed with the CEO of EUCX as well, with Eric the other day, that we don't need 100,000 different tokens and coins listed on our exchange. We don't need even anything else, just maybe Bitcoin. And you know why? If we can convince 50-60% of the population just here in the Netherlands that Bitcoin is not a criminal thing, it's not a crime to own or buy a Bitcoin, you get so many more users than by trying to appeal to this niche 1-2% of the world who are risking their life savings on some shitcoin.
Yeah. I actually see, I like that idea a lot because I think it's simple. And with education, the more complex it is, the harder it is for people to actually absorb it and to accept it and to learn it to move on. And if you've got a niche product or a niche idea, actually, that you can teach people repeatedly over and over and over again, it becomes easy to understand. And when it's easy to understand, they can explain it to a friend, and then you start getting adoption. And I like that idea. I really do.
Exactly. And you're not going to get adoption by saying how many billions of euros or dollars were raised by this project and then they disappear. That puts the scare in people, because that reassures them that, okay, it was a good decision not to enter into crypto and not to own any Ethereum or Bitcoin or whatever, as opposed to just becoming the really, the well-known, well-established and licensed entity that has an entire national bank behind them, and then propagate, the news that, hey, this is according to the rules, everything is fine. We have the blessing of the national bank, the financial authority, the European Union, etc. And then they will start buying that one currency, that one coin that's there. And then we can branch out, of course. So it's, to whoever is listening, it's not like we're not going to have other tokens or other coins listed. Of course we will, and it's all open for discussion. Just saying that if you think very simple, I think we can achieve mass adoption faster.
Yeah, I think if you boil it down to the individual, what they're concerned about is, as you rightly said, it's not the hype. They're interested in their own money, their own lives, what they're investing in, how it impacts them, whether they can further themselves, their kids' education. And if you can help them understand and to get a benefit, just one person, you can get 100 people in, you can get 1,000, and it just makes it much easier.
Exactly.
Because I think with adoption as well, there's a lot of regulatory obstacles, and obviously from your perspective with the law, you see that in different jurisdictions and things blocking whatever moves that companies make or attempt to make because of their laws. And if you've ironed that out right at the base, you stand a very good chance of getting the bigger banks, the bigger governments, etc., to actually buy into it. And that encourages as well.
Absolutely. There are three big groups. There's the group of friendly jurisdictions, the neutral ones, and the hostile jurisdictions. And what usually makes them hostile is that whatever project you bring to them, whatever crypto or blockchain that has nothing to do with currencies, whatever it is, but as soon as you mention either crypto or blockchain, they sort of classify it under a certain umbrella. The very good example is that, for example, China or the US or even India banning or semi-banning, or just simply putting everything crypto under one hat. And then there is the other far end, which is also not sustainable, is to create an entirely new law or an entirely new article provision for every single token or coin and every single functionality. I mean, that's impossible. There are more than
impossible. That is an impossible task.
So how do you make the compromise then? Where do you draw the line that okay, this token, I don't know, it's a derivative of an STO, so it gives shares to a company. There are also dividends, there's revenue sharing. Oh, but the next one, it doesn't actually. However, if you withdraw it within 1 year, then you get 120% back, or what have you not. You cannot just cherry pick whatever you like and whatever you don't like, and then in the end hope that the regulators will agree with you. So I think there's also a need for the regulators to be educated about this, so that they can make the best or the good kind of compromise when it comes to choosing between the two sides.
So what would you say would be the 2 or 3 most pertinent questions for people that were going to put money on an exchange? What should they be asking?
When it comes to the exchange itself, or when it comes to the decision to put anything on an exchange?
I think both, because firstly, they want to trust the institution where they're going to be putting their money. Yes. And then secondly, they want to know that they're actually making the right decision with their money.
Well, you already sort of answered it. It's actually the number one issue is like we discussed as well, is trust. And when it comes to trust, I know it's boring, but I would definitely recommend just scrolling through the terms and conditions. What you're going to find in 9 out of 10 places is that they put some sort of no class action arbitration clause and definitely an arbitration clause in place so that they can never be sued. Now, if that's not a red flag, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
And usually they will choose an arbitration with the 3 arbiters and a very expensive venue where you would have to put down 250 to 300,000 euros just to even sue them. Now, if you had, or let's say 5 or 10K in question that was lost, you're not going to go that route. That's just a very niche example. That's just a very specific example. But if you just scroll through the terms and conditions, you can find many more of these little mistakes or surprises. Then I would also check the jurisdiction of their main entity, if it's even possible to check, or if it's even public information. And if it's not, that's another red flag. And generally speaking, the KYC and the AML requirements that they put in place, the harder it is for you to get in, the better, because that also means that that scammer or that troll has a very hard time registering an account. So
that's actually very good advice, David.
I think so too. That's how I usually see it. The more of a problems or more questions I ask from a client, the happier he should be, because that means that I'm not working with criminals or with scammers, etc. So that goes to show that there are a lot of things that even simple, people sitting at home sipping their coffee can do. They don't need to be experts. They just need to take 5 minutes before committing. You shouldn't jump on the opportunity because your friend said so. You should just Google it a bit, check some articles, because there are a lot of articles about scams and ongoing investigations and lawsuits, especially against the big 3-4 exchanges. And then to answer the question of whether you should enter into crypto or this whole magical world or not, usually if you have to ask that question, the answer should be no. Because if you ask that question, you haven't clearly researched enough and read up on it enough to have a basic understanding of what you're entering into. And I would say that's true for everything in the world. If you have to ask these questions, you do not know it good enough. You do not have a good grip on it yet.
But I agree with you on that. But with a lot of people out there, the buzzword is crypto. People see it in the press. It's all over social media, etc., etc. And yet the education that's actually out there, that's easy to find and legit, is not readily accessible, because there's a lot of stuff out there that's rubbish. It's like trying to look for a needle in a haystack.
I agree with you fully there.
Yeah, you might have people that sincerely are looking for an avenue to invest in for their kids' future, for whatever it is, but they don't really know what it is. How could we bridge that divide and actually help people with an education so that they could see that this is a viable option and something that will grow into the future and something that they should be researching?
Well, then it actually goes back to our earlier point of discussion where we discussed that it actually has to be, taught. It has to be taught in courses, in universities. I think just like they started teaching AI and drones, it's very important that we have an accessible and publicly accessible source of information for blockchain and for specifically crypto investments and the big ones, Bitcoin and Ether, and how do they work? What kind of implications do they have? What kind of functionality, utilities, etc. So I would say that what I started doing is actually a start, but it's just a start. More people and more actually qualified experts need to partake in this, and not just for the hype and not just for the fame, but actually for the willingness to pass on that knowledge, and for the protection of the investors and for the protection of the creditors.
Thanks. I just want to circle back to Vicarium Academy, because you actually cover a lot of topics there of emerging technologies. You just mentioned AI, smart cities, the Internet of Things, etc. how could a student access that information from the academy, and what would you suggest as a starting point?
I would say, well, basically they can always get in touch with me. So that's an option.
Yeah.
Feel free to. Even now, I'm helping with an interview and with some articles. A young girl, a student here in the Netherlands, who is writing her thesis about drones, for example. And a lot of times, I'm also speaking publicly about these things. So wherever you can, visit those. But I understand that not everybody is in a position to just up and go visit these conferences. Sometimes they have steep entry fees, sometimes they're free. So to have a consistent source of knowledge, I would say go and seek peer-reviewed journals. Usually these go through a very heavy filtering and selection period, sometimes maybe too heavy and too harsh. But if you manage to find anything about blockchain, AI, drone, or just any of the emerging technologies there, that means that it managed to go through the cracks and it's actually good material.
Okay, so
as a start.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is a good place to start. So at this point in time, your academy is focusing on physical live talks at specific venues on specific topics.
Exactly, and we actually took one extra step. And now we are in a partnership with Samsung and another company from Qatar, GIT. And we're going to create a company here in the Netherlands that's going to actually sell and give access to smart products. So okay. These range from parking to glass to smart education, smart medicine, and smart homes, smart cities, everything. Just add smart in front of it. And yeah, as you heard, the quality is Samsung and the availability is local in Europe.
That sounds great. So just one other thing I wanted to ask you about your academy. If I wanted to go and look at one of your talks, are they recorded? Could I go and have a look at a video?
Usually they are recorded, but only for people who are either our clients or members of our classes. But if there's enough interest, we can even organize a separate venue, or we can even go to places. Okay,
excellent. Thank you. I know we sort of on the cusp of a turning point. It's like a turning point in history in the way, I mean, right across the board, everything works. As you said, there are too many industries to actually mention. We'll be here all day. And and legally, obviously, you've got some pitfalls and the quicksand to navigate to get us from here to a future that is ordered and structured in a way that's it's fair and equitable to all. It must take a lot of thought and energy and focus. Are there any sort of, I mean, how do you set up your day, David? Do you have any daily rituals or beliefs or habits that you feel are integral in your success in this space that keep you focused?
Oh, I'm actually very emotional and motivation based in that sense, because if I get just enough motivation, then I can even go through 2-3 days without sleeping and just really battle through that project and just do it.
Wow.
But other than that, yeah, it's not really unhealthy. Is what it is. Sometimes I reach 115, 120 hours a week that are like working hours, but that also depends on what kind of active projects I have. So I usually work on a campaign basis. So it's not like I wake up and I have a 9-to-5 sort of schedule and I just do my job or my work. It's more like, okay, this has to be taken care of. There's a fire that has to be put out. There's a trip that has to be arranged. There's a meeting, etc., etc. And I sort of just schedule it in such a way that everything gets, ample attention and focus without losing, my focus from the bigger picture, from the bigger plan.
I was going to ask you how you maintain a high level of motivation and energy, but I can hear it. You're passionate about it. And when you find something that you're passionate about, you put your head down and you work.
Absolutely. And I don't join projects that have nothing to do with what I'm doing, or basically I find them either immoral or unethical. So I usually join projects that kind of fit in this portfolio of, emerging technologies. So I have projects like energy, like Bintan Energy, that works on tokenizing and digitalizing basically renewable energy. I work on projects that are.
Topic, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a very interesting topic.
I think all of these topics are turning the tide. This is gonna be the new age. It's about renewable energy, emerging markets, smart products, AI, drone, blockchain, and that's where I kind of center my attention around.
Gee, man, it's such an exciting place to be. It's funny, everybody I talk to in the sort of blockchain space, or I've had the privilege to chat to, are excited and optimistic about the future and actually doing something better to improve humanity's chances as a whole. And I really like it. It's nice being associated with people that are actually doing something. So
yes.
Yeah.
I like to also organize my personal network like that, my friends, who have the same kind of interests, so that you kind of mix leisure and pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to say thanks for your time, David. I know you're a very busy guy and really appreciate you taking some time out to chat to us and just to give us an insight. I've certainly learned a lot, I've taken a lot of notes. So
thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, an absolute pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you too. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
You were listening to an English Forward production, the web's largest Learn English community and Q&A site. Everything you need to understand and improve your English. Visit EnglishForward.com.